Welcome, everyone. It's Wednesday, August 12th, 2026, to the Jupyter contributor call. Uh, Before we start, FYI, there's an eclipse happening in about an hour to the next couple of hours. We hope everyone can see something of it. Mike, I think you're up first.
Okay, thank you. So first, I wanted to call out that the Jupyter ESLint plugin has had a 1.1 release, and I'm actually not sure if that should be version 2 or different rules that the ESLint follows. But still, it's out, and it includes lots of new rules. Uh, Sharing the link to the documentation in the chat, and I think some of them are very useful. So some will only be relevant to extensions with translation, uh, so that support translation, but others, such as the signal and disposable rules, are generally useful for detecting any potential memory leaks. And if not for GitHub preventing me from doing so, I would open a pull request which demonstrates that with a rather simple refactor, we can save about 3 MB in a small notebook when navigating cells with the sidebar open on property panel. And over a longer, like 8-hour session in a larger notebook, the wins could vary from 200 MB to maybe 800 MB. It's like a huge fix, which can be detected using these these rules. I would encourage any extension developer to adapt the ESN plugin, and if you already have that, update to the newest version. Um, and the existing rules also got a couple of updates. Um, One other rule that may be worth mentioning is a Galata rule, which allows like highlights when writing UI tests when there is a helper for opening files. Sorry, when you try to open files manually using custom selectors rather than using Galata, it will light up and show, hey, you can use this utility function, and it will probably do the job better. So that's useful also because it will like when generating test cases with AI, LLMs might know everything about Playwright, but very little about Galata. And Galata is just much better at certain tasks dedicated, like specific to notebooks or to the Jupyter interface. So you will get less flaky tests if you use these utility helpers. And that's the first rule that we added. We hope to add more. But even the one rule, if the LLM sees that, I hope it will put it in on the right track of self-correcting and using the helpers which are available. I see a question. Is this development beyond what the blog post covered? Yes, the blog post covered version 1, and version 1.1 is like building on top of that and including additional rules. Um, and it is funded by the uh, last round of the CFPs, the first round of CFPs. Okay. Any questions or thoughts, ideas for rules?
This
Thank
will
you for
be
linking. Yeah.
picked up by the copier template, right? Or is that
Uh,
still
the the ESLint plugin is in the copier template. We'll bump the template to use v1.1 soon. It was just released yesterday, so I hope sometime this or next week it will be picked up by copier, yes. Although in the copier we are not enabling all the rules in the template. So if someone has like a large extension, they might want to go over the list of rules and choose whether they should be warn or error. if they want to follow stricter practices than what the defaults are. And in Jupyter Lab Core, basically all these rules are going to be error.
This is really cool. Thanks for contributing this. Yeah, this will be super helpful, not just for like developers, but I think like also like AI agents could make use of this and like at least like correct them from stop them from making like really silly mistakes. So how do maintainers verify that this is actually working on their repo? Like, I think right now you just is dev installed this ESLint plugin, added to ESLint config, and that's like very reliable. Like that will always work basically.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Well, you can try to violate one of the rules, and you should see that error either in your ID or in when running the lint command. Now, I think in a larger plugin there is a decent chance that at least one of these rules is already violated.
Hmm.
Currently, we are downstream testing Jupyter Lab codebase and Notebook codebase. But I was thinking, and then actually before release, I was testing a number of extensions as well. Maybe we'll add some of the core extensions, like extensions which are outside of the core distribution, but which are maintained by in Jupyter Lab org or in Jupyter org to the testing so that we can flag those easily and avoid any regressions. But because this plugin gets version locked in the log file, any new releases generally do not introduce regressions until you update. And the dependencies are very slim. It's basically some ESLint types and scaffolding, very, very, very small. We don't anticipate any frequent security fixes or patches that will need to move that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, these are just like dev tools, right? So it would have to be a very, very weird security vulnerability to have an actual impact. I have noticed that, like, yeah, just like off topic, but I have noticed that there are a lot of people who submit like security reports because they just run some kind of like weird AI scanner tool on the yarn.lock file, and then they point something out, and it's like, this is just a dev dependency. But yeah,
That's a
this is
great
cool.
segue into my next topic, actually.
Really? Okay.
Unless we have, I will just reorder my bullet points so that it matches.
Okay.
Um, for the next round of CFPs, I'm working on a couple of proposals. I wanted to highlight three that I already shared with the Security Council yesterday, and those are security oriented. Now, one of the frequent problems that we have on Jupyter Lab is that we rely on third-party sanitizer, and the rules that we use for CSS, for example, were derived from Kaja Google project that ceased to exist a couple of years back. The sanitizer gets bug fixes and security fixes frequently, like Sanitiz's HTML has 120 something releases, and we get these pull requests and we need to review them, verify that they were correctly published, which I have some opinion on that, um, and then ship to users in order for them to benefit from that. On top of that, there is a class of security issues which arise when the sanitizer is not used, and that's very easy to write code which does things like that, which does bypass the sanitizer, especially for extensions to do that. And there is a solution. It's called trusted types. We have an issue in Jupyter Lab actually discussing both the sanitizer and trusted types. So I'm linking the proposal that could um, that aims to address that by allowing us to use trusted types. So for context, this is a CSP flag that is set on the server. And when it's set, you are not like the browser will not allow setting a row string on, say, .inner HTML. It will just error on runtime. Currently, Jupyter Lab wouldn't work if we enabled that. So there is some adjustments needed in the course. There is some adjustments needed in extensions, and a lot of work around that. So yeah, plugging that for awareness, maybe also asking the Frontends Council for kind of endorsement, and any questions, any thoughts on that, I'm happy to take those. The direct link to the proposal is here. If there are none, I will move to the second proposal. That is also a security one, a secure extension manager. So the extension manager that we used to have in Jupyter Lab 3 included some more security features than we have nowadays, and the world has moved. We have much better ability to validate the artifacts for extensions. We have trusted publishing. We have attestations. We can verify the organization on PyPI, but we are not doing any of that. Furthermore, unfortunately, it became much easier to spread malware through extensions, and all the extension ecosystems were impacted for most IDEs or platforms. So in the proposal, I link to what was discussed publicly previously in Jupyter channels as well. The Obsidian plugin outage caused by Trojan in April this year, VS Code extension filtration in May, JetBrains having to remotely deactivate 30 plugins in June. So this is not going to solve that. We do not curate the extensions. We do not have tight control over the extension ecosystem, but we can protect users by giving them hints on the quality of the extensions. In some ways, we can verify whether it was published securely or not. We can provide them with options to update extensions easily, and we can also do the opposite and not show the update button until a configured cooldown time has passed. So there's lots of things that we could do. I'm proposing to explore a little bit of that. Again, it's a work in progress proposal. If the community thinks that this is valuable, I will continue pursuing that and submit. I think it is. I was really hoping to get that done for a number of years now. And finally, the third one, the one where I'm not so sure about whether that should be submitted in this cycle, but something that I want to talk about anyways. And this is sandboxed extensions. So currently, an extension, frontend extension, runs with access to everything. There is no API boundary. The API is more of a contract for adults. We say, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. You should use the public methods which are exposed. But there's no tight enforcement on the security boundary. Just like if you use something which is not in public API, on the next update, your extension is likely going to break. Web workers are a way to achieve that nowadays, and have been for quite a while. Many platforms that run in the browser use web workers for extensions for isolation. Previously, people would use iframes, but that's not as convenient as a web worker. And web worker, in addition to providing a security boundary, also provides some performance benefit because you are not running on the same thread. And we get to redefine the API and interface, because the data now needs to be exchanged in a very specific format. So I'm not sure if we are ready to move to sandboxed extensions for the front end to a web worker. But I want to start conversation about that. And I also included a link to in that proposal to an issue that I started and talked about last week, which would be doing the same, but on the server side, where in my dream, we would eventually get to the state where we can run the same extension or a subset of server extensions across Jupyterverse, Jupyter Server, and Jupyter Lite, and have them sandboxed with a tightly scoped contract for the public API. Happy to take suggestions. I would very much welcome some opinions on whether that is something that we should propose for this round of community funded proposals or not. Maybe it needs way more exploration first, but the phrasing of the proposal is not to let's spend a lot of money, a lot of time and resources to move our extensions to this new thing. It's more like let's prototype a first version. Let's do a little bit of work to start the ball rolling and facilitate the conversations in the community. Nick.
Yes, we should do it. And there's a few spots that are super high value. NB convert. You know, if someone wants to sit down and vibe translate, you know, the Python one into even a crappy version in something that directly compiles to WASM in a couple megabytes. You know, Longpull is going to be a sandbox template engine like Mini Jinja, but you know, a couple megabytes, not a full container, not the entire Python runtime and everything that goes with it, but like NB convert in a tiny box. That's still extensible with files, you know, like maintains many of the features that we love. The other one's language server. And there are a number of really good language servers that are just garbage to install. And it is not simple for someone to go into the extension manager and find something and make it do the thing. Yeah, the PDF exporter is 100 megabytes of WASM. So let's get to HTML. Browsers are really good at drawing HTML, and then you can press print, and things are great. The interesting thing is the runtime, because WASM is not just WASM, right? So even Python itself has backpedaled a few different times on what they mean by WASM. Presently, the only supported PEP-based thing is mscript in WASM, which will not run on a naive WASI-based server thingamajigger. But on the server, we can run V8, or we can run Dino, or we can run something. So whatever happens here, we should focus on the standards or the fake standard that is the mscripting thing, but that people are building standards on top of, you know, whatever. Let's not talk about that particular supply chain risk, but different runtimes should be possible. So like on the Python side for trying this out, I would go right to Mini Racer or PyDuckTape, because those are V8 and they support mscripting fully, and you're running inside a V8 isolate, which is probably the most punished sandbox mechanism possible. Because that's going to run an mscript in WASM, and you'll be able to use that inside of the browser and inside of a V8 runtime on the server. I think we'll get there with WASI because that has the goods, right? That has all the really good stuff that we want for doing server-based stuff. But yeah, like meeting some need that we already, like something core to the experience, right? Like the spell checker. If we had a general purpose WASM approach, we could use a real grammar checker, not just a spell checker, you know? So the language servers are a magnificent thing. We should have a JSON language server because we have UI where you type JSON built into Jupyter Lab. So those two fellas, those feel like the hot stuff to me. And then if you want to go to containers, you want to go to subprocess, or you want to go to mscripted and Forge Conda stuff or whatever, you can get there. But focus on the standards is the win.
Yes, you can always wrap WASM runtime, the V8, inside the container. And then if you are very paranoid, you can put that into another container.
And in the browser, you can put it inside of an iframe on an opaque domain, such as about blank, that you inject into it. And then you are actually using the browser's security stuff instead of hand waving new security stuff. We can hand wave new security stuff on top of it, but an iframe is actually a better security layer if used properly than just a web worker by a significant margin. So, we would want to show a JSON language server is running inside of an iframe inside of a WASM, and it only gets access to the files on content that you tell it can have. Like that would be the awesome. This is the right way to do it all the way to the end. If you eventually need a front end that can say, hey, go do this React thing over there, yeah, it's real interesting, doesn't it? Possible. That's what the things like Comlink and Coincident and whatnot do. And Pyodide even, you can mirror parts of the API, but you would not want the thing inside the sandbox to be able to ask for things that you didn't give it.
That's a very good question on scoping, whether the proof of concept should include React. Yeah.
Well, can it run Jupyter commands? Phrase it around that first, right? So, like, which commands
yes,
will be useful?
Definitely. Yeah.
Which commands do I need to ask for this thing, and what's a bad one? Like macros, right? We've been talking about that forever. Writing macros out of commands. That would be like, this is unsafe. This is not a safe thing to can execute any command is not a safe thing to ask for.
Yeah. There is lots of interesting discussions. I will just note that one small objection to this proposal around web workers that was mentioned in the security meeting yesterday was, hey, what if we wanted the front-end extensions at some point to run on the server side so that you can have the state persist in that way rather than like you go to a different browser and the front-end extension is still running there. It is like hard to think through use cases for that that couldn't be solved with another approach. But yeah, there are very interesting possibilities that open up when we start rethinking the extension architecture. And I'm very happy to like pose on this proposal and spend more time just brainstorming. But on the other hand, if this proposal is going to give some dedicated resources to facilitate, maybe that's the way.
Well, yeah, I mean that's why I went to the effort of describing that whole async API thing. If you define the architecture as a specification, and then you can add the piece that you want, and the thing that's underlying it works in different runtimes. Some of them live in the browser and some of them live in the server. You could probably move them at runtime. You could decide, oh man, my JSON language server is running too slow. I'm going to move it to the server right now. I'm just going to move it. I'm going to run this in the server. And now it's running in the server because you said so. And you could potentially keep the state. I don't know. I mean, like the in the general case, no, you can't generally move a subprocess with open file handles between different runtimes. But being able to move a kernel from the browser, I want to start a little Scratch kernel in the browser. It's just a little Jupyter Light nonsense. I'm doing a thing. Oh, this is getting kind of big. I'm going to move the kernel to the server. You could actually do that.
Okay, that's out of scope for that proposal. Definitely, it's kernel is not an extension, but it's super cool if you could do that. It's yeah. Anyways, um, I wanted to address the comment from David on the HackMD notes whether the two proposals should be merged. And I acknowledge, yes, they do share a similar story. So the extension manager, ideally, a secure version of an extension manager would show you which permissions the extension is asking for. But in order to have the list of permissions, we need to have them sandboxed in the first place because any list that we would show right now would not be enforceable. So the way I'm phrasing it in the current proposal is we'll make it future-proof to enable that capability, enable that in the future, which is not very hard. But I think like with the variety and number of proposals being submitted, I don't think that all of these can be realistically funded. So I'm just trying to separate the thing which I think are very nice to have, but long term, and if they do not get addressed soon, that's fine. From things that I think we really need to solve now.
Yeah, regardless, thanks for putting these together. Like even if they don't end up getting accepted, I still think there's a lot of value in just like starting the conversation around this and like starting to think about it. One thing I did want to just like call out is like I think like the need for sandboxing and for like this some kind of API to like basically have an extension declare its set of capabilities and like what APIs like giving APIs to it on an as needed basis. I think that that is a critical part security feature for any kind of modular framework where you can just like add plugins from wherever you want. And to me, like the story here, like very like the story definitely intersects with Jupyter Server in a way. I don't think that's captured right now in the original proposal, but I know that you have also been talking about this in another GitHub issue where it's like sort of related, where it's like, could we split up like some pieces of the Jupyter Server or let extensions run as like sidecar processes, right? And then when you have that, then it's like, okay, now you have multiple processes talking to each other. Now you can have that capability like declaration because yeah, they are like now there's an API contract between the main server and that sub process. I think the tricky thing with server extensions is like that server extension could just like delete the entire root directory when you import it because it can just run whatever Python code it wants. So that's not really solved.
Nowadays, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I think the server side is what worries me a lot more because that code doesn't even have to run, like it just gets imported and then, yeah, like all sorts of bad things can happen.
I'm worried equally by both. Like really from the standpoint of a deployer, maybe you get more worried from the server side because you can configure the front end, separate that, split kernels from servers, etc. But for an ordinary user who just installs Jupyter from the web, they can get as much damage done from the front end extensions as they can from the servers because front end can interface with the server fully.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, it's like, I guess like what I'm trying to say is like, if we if we make front end, like what limits the security of any extension package you install is like the minimum security offered by both the lab extension and the server extension. So it's like if we increase
Yes.
the security of lab take, right? But like the server, increasing security for server extensions is
Yes, yes.
also a prerequisite.
The only counter argument is that the pure frontend extensions could be marked as like more secure, but in reality, most extensions have both frontend and server part, so we'll only get to this nice state once we address both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
This is some great conversation. Mike, what's next for your proposals?
I will incorporate the feedback and once ready, I will probably send a message to the Frontends Council asking for endorsement. They are not ready yet. They are more like steps that I wanted to present. And heads up, I'm writing more, but these are the three security used proposals. Two others are more on a Jupyter Lab desktops side of things, and there's more that my team is also thinking about. But yeah, I'm trying to get these things out early so that those can be discussed and potentially deduplicated if other people were also thinking about them. And yeah, I might propose things and open proposals that I will close as I still think through what things are best to submit in this cycle and what are not.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I love the conversation prompted by all of the things you're bringing up. Zach, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple things. A question probably directed at Mike, because I think you probably have the most context, is I was doing another pass at the execute endpoint. And so for context for folks, in order to bring in the ability to do server-side notebook state, instead of going through the WebSocket channels for communicating with the kernel when you are running a cell, we leave those alone. We don't change those. We've added a new endpoint in some other areas. So like Jupyterverse does this as an example. There's another package called Jupyter Server MB model that's not under the Jupyter ecosystem. It's or I'll say governance. It's under Eric Charles's org at Data Layer. And in that endpoint, they have an execute endpoint where you can post cell execution requests, and that's how cells run. And then the response can either be polled. So I think in MB server model, there's polling to look for when that response is done. If there is no CRDT on the server, if there is a CRDT, then the responses from the cell execution requests go directly into the YDoc, and then the way it shows up in the front end is through a sync, a Y sync. So that's how the state of the document and outputs lives on the server, and the way that the browser or the client gets it is through just a typical Y sync operation. So it's cool. That's how we get. It solves the problem of, you run a cell and you close your laptop or you disconnect your browser. You don't lose those outputs while that cell is running. So that's a pretty nice benefit of that. I know we're going to have this long discussion on where CRDT fits in the following hour, but I still want to make progress on this endpoint because I think it's critical API to get into core Jupyter Server at some point. And so my question after that long intro is that previously, and I think this was based on what they're doing in Jupyter Server MB model, the API for how we link execute requests in, right? So because we're using HTTP requests, we're not using WebSockets for executing cells. There is no guarantee that if you do like a run all, that those cell execution requests will come in order. Now, I think a run all operation, we might be able to create a request that bundles them. But if someone just slams the keyboard or hits Shift Enter 100 times really, really fast, there's no guarantee they come in order. And so we, in the implementation, the reference implementation that we've done in Jupyter Server documents, and it might be in Jupyter Server MB model, though I haven't followed that as closely, is we basically have in that model just a reference to the ID of the previous cell that's been executed. And that creates like a backwards, a reverse linked list. You can kind of look back, and then you just wait until the previous one is run before you run. there's some subtle challenges with that I found that you can get in a scenario where you can't really know if if a request didn't come in, you're just going to stall the kernel, install the front end for a while, and then you just have to put an arbitrary timeout. And so the experience just hangs until that happens, where you can kind of shrink that. Basically, my proposal, instead of doing a linked list, is why don't we just do something that's not so relative in position, but is absolute, where the client gives you a monotonically increasing number, and then the server can directly know, okay, so in the queue, this is its position, and there might be gaps that I'm waiting for, but then it can kind of pinpoint the timeout. Like that gap never gets filled. I don't want to hold on as long, and I can directly let the user know what happened. Is there? I don't know if that's been tried or if there's any thoughts on that, but I was going to work on implementing that unless we've tried this already before and yeah, and it's going to break things. I don't want to break anybody's world. I'm working on the JEP, but I want this JEP to be, have good reference implementation that shows that it's working. We're going to write a JEP for this endpoint. But I'm very validating the API through that. So, okay, hands up, Nick.
Yeah. And it's been mentioned before in the context of making cells in the notebook not a list, because those are terrible for everybody involved and are the source of many of our problems with duplicate cell IDs and all of those things. If you think about the notebook as a set of named things keyed by their ID, the ordering within them can be done to allow someday DAG. But first, just using a float for its position in the notebook allows you to do zero change or exactly one change reordering, as opposed to a linked list, which can require multiple things if you cut stuff out or whatever. So a cut, you just delete. It's a single record delete. This becomes a thing as well when you're trying to run them, because you just look across those list of floats. And the great thing about floats, you can make more floats. You can take two floats and add them together and divide it by 2, and now you got something that lives between them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is not an argument against integers, because integers can be replaced by floats without breaking the API in the future. At least I hope so. If we specify integers today as the sequence numbers and then we swap them to floats, we are still happy.
And in JavaScript, it doesn't matter because
until you get to big int. Until you get to big int. No, there are real,
true,
much
fair
like
enough.
WASI,
These days, yes,
actual typed Indian aware sized but bite-sized values, and using them lets you use them across all the other languages. That's why we formally specified a bunch of other things in other places where it was like, it's a string. It was like, it's always a GUID. If it's always a GUID, just call it a GUID, and then people that are writing strongly typed languages can use them. But yeah, the DAG thing, it's not just a DAG. You'd build control flow as well. And there would be a lot of things that you would have to know about a lot of things to know whether that happens. So don't just think DAG, think state machine, right? And turns out that primitive solves like 95% of our problems across a bunch of these things.
Yeah.
So what I maybe for the sake of this question specifically is getting away from what we did, which was just referencing a previous request, a linked list approach is okay to pursue.
It doesn't seem worse at a initial glance. Okay. I'm not. I just don't want to promise you that if you write a JEP where you're using sequence numbers, I'm not.
I just don't want to waste my time. yeah. No. It sounds like it's worth a community discussion. Is the way I took it. I might, in our reference limitation of JSD, I might submit a PR there and merge a PR after review, of course, of just playing with that. That's an experimental playground. I know we're going to talk about, what JSD's role in Jupyter AI is. I think again, if we start to really decouple those, it'll make this easier to play with. But I was thinking about opening PR for that.
At some point, if we are going to arrive at the future model where we use floats, I would worry, how do we, like, if we are ever going to show a graph of dependencies, which is not linear, or in the order of executions of cells, knowing on which cell does an execution depends on which previous cell execution the current execution depends, allows you to construct a tree or a DAG easily. Having a float, well, it's hard to compare floats, and like so maybe the final approach would need to involve both, is all that I'm saying. If we ever wanted to, like, I know that it's very far-fetched, like we are not doing that today, but yeah.
No, but you're right. It's once we commit to an API, it gets harder to change it later. So, okay, I'll elevate this in the JEP. I'd like to get that JEP open this week. So that I just wanted to get some temperature gauge on that. So that's helpful for me. I think we need that is going to be kind of probably the most discussed point of the model in this API. So I want to get that right. So basically, maybe this is better just to say it's an invitation to, I'll put a draft out there with an opinion, but it's not, I don't hold it tightly. Like it's open hands.
So just to follow up on my suggestion, let's make sure that we can use both. As long as you are returning like a JSON object, or using an object which can be extended, we are not over-committing to something specific. And if you were going to use just an integer as a single parameter or single output, that would be harder to commit to.
Totally. Yeah. So then separately, I am doing some work so I'll just go to the next point because I know we're running on, we're over time for the AI part of this call, but there's a PR that I opened a long time ago where I kind of refactored the server to leverage kernel clients. And I'm going to close that in favor of kind of some changes we've made in Jupyter Server documents that tries to take the same approach. It uses the kernel client abstraction. And I think it's good. Like, I think it's that we should be using our objects. And then in that PR, I will probably put the reference implementation for the execute endpoint behind like a flag, as a V3 that you can turn on and people can start trying. And it won't bring CRDT. It's just the execute endpoint kind of, supporting the backwards approach too, but just to have a place where we can maybe start building off of in Jupyter Lab. And that just allows me to have something to point at for the JEP. That's the reason or the motivation there. So wanted to let you all know that. I think that's it for me. I have lots of thoughts on CRDT stuff, but we'll save that for the next call.
Yeah.
Before we get,
I think Adam's got one more point too. Oh,
yeah,
sorry, David.
Yeah, Zach, I've been like rereading the bullet point that you wrote for a while, and I still don't really fully understand the scope of the problem. Like, is there a issue that like describes this in a little more detail that I could just like read up on? Because I don't fully understand like the problem right now. It's like you need to reference the previous cell ID and the output that you return from the execute API.
No, so the issue is that requests don't come in order. Right. So execution requests. So we have to resolve order on the server. And right now, the way we do it is we just build a linked list. Like you know your relative position. You just know who your previous person is. And I'm just saying I would advocate for us for the server to actually know and have and anticipate what's coming in by using, a sequence of numbers. So the simplest thing would be monotomically increasing if you just were going to do a linear chain, and that way it knows what gaps there are as these requests roll in. And that allows us to pinpoint some timeouts. So like if a request never comes through for whatever reason, it got dropped, you know exactly where in that chain it was broken versus this like ambiguous, I'm just going to wait till this one ID comes in. I never saw it. How long do I wait? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 30 seconds? Is it a second? And so, and you don't know if you're waiting for a whole chain or whatever. So it just starts to get really complex from a user experience perspective. And so allowing us to kind of pinpoint each request and its position in a chain is helpful.
I see.
So just to make sure that when you're saying chains, if I select like 10 cells in the Jupyter Live UI and I run selected cells, would that be 10 individual execute requests, or would that be one hit to the API saying execute these 10 cells?
Yeah, so we've included the ability for you if you do that. Like if the client can resolve that this is a group, it can send multiple cells to execute in a bundle. So in that case, it would not be multiple requests; it'd be one. But in the scenario where someone does like, shift enter, or shift enter their whole notebook, just hold shift enter down and just runs every cell. If we don't necessarily catch that in the UI, that could be considered, if they have 10 cells, 10 separate requests, and they could come in essentially out of order because they were executed so closely together that in that scenario, we're not executing them as a bundle, we're executing them in, as 10 separate requests.
Wouldn't it be up to the client to make sure that they send them in order?
Well,
you can send them in order, but
yes.
you have no guarantee on the network that they will
Yes.
arrive in order.
Yeah, unless
and
you
by the
wait
way,
for a receipt signal
well, then that's very
for each
slow.
individual.
Yeah,
So
in the
super
US,
what you're
slow.
saying is
really slow.
you're putting a sequence on this on the client side before you send it off so that the server can reassemble them.
That's right.
Which is not to say that we shouldn't have some very small debouncer or throttler, whatever, on the client side. It's just it will not catch all the cases. And by the way, I sent that a couple of times. There's issue on IPy widgets that I opened, which is a new out of order issue that we get with this server-side execution because the comms are not synchronized to the REST API for execution. So we get fun new problems to solve.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
WebSockets are nice.
Sorry if I was tuned out a bit. Do you also handle like multiple users, multiple clients on the same server?
So each request is document ID, their sequence position, client ID.
Right. Okay.
And then maybe cell ID. Or I don't remember. I gotta remember what the. But yeah, there's.
And how do you? So when it's from multiple clients, you just do them in the order that they come in.
Yes.
Right.
So the guarantee is that for a specific client, you'll respect the sequence.
Correct.
So if something comes in out of order for one client, they get delayed until it gets resolved, right?
Correct.
Makes sense to me.
Right. We'll have a lot of fun RTC conversation in a minute, but Adam first. Adam, did you want to say anything about the PDF export or just leave a note in the doc?
Oh, I was just going to leave the note there that with Callisto, you don't need Pandoc and it's just so smooth.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this. Just opened the link. Oh, this is really cool. This is something that I've had people asking about is like, how can you, like right now, a lot of people use Jupyter notebooks for doing like academic research. But I think like one of the gaps that they're finding is like, it's a bit hard to like take a notebook and convert it into like part of a actual like draft publication that you would submit to a journal. And like, there has been some talk from like some of the people who have been using Jupyter AI to say like, hey, is there a way to like train, like basically give an AI a skill or a set of tools that basically helps them turn this at like basically turn this into a draft research proposal, like one notebook. And maybe it's like multiple notebooks, right? Like I doubt that like one single notebook would contain everything you need for like a scientific publication, but it certainly is a, yeah, like one of the main gaps is like, how do you actually go from some notebook to an actual PDF? So yeah, this is really cool. Thanks for sharing this. All right. Yeah,
Adam,
sorry.
can you remind me, is your code available somewhere? No pressure or anything. Just curious if there's a code link.
Yep, I'll post a link in the chat. Almost everything we do at Rubin Observatory is either under GPL3 for the pipeline stuff or MIT for most of the surrounding stuff. This is MIT licensed, and
Cool.
I'll put the link up.
Cool. Thanks, Adam.
There is really very little to the export through typist function, which is the glorious thing.
That's awesome. All right, on to AI topics.
Ooh.
I don't have a person. Is it David?
Sure. Yeah. I
Hey.
put that there. This is a pretty big one, so I think like it would be helpful just to open with some context in case like you all haven't seen like the things going on in Zulip. But basically last week, and I still don't know why exactly this all happened at once, but around last Wednesday, I suddenly got like a flood of different reports regarding some really severe bugs. People who have like, been around with the project for a long time, this will sound pretty familiar, but these bugs involve data loss. And specifically like these bugs see the vast majority of like the most catastrophic reports where like the notebook is completely deleted or somehow reset to an empty state halfway through, they are coming from remote deployments, which is curious. So I'm talking like people deploying Jupyter Lab onto like a remote server or via Jupyter Hub, things like that, right? Like a lot of enterprise and research institution use cases are running into this. And what's really concerning is like not only is this like obviously catastrophic for Jupyter AI users and definitely like a really, really bad experience, but some of the ongoing collaborations that we want to lead, some of which could lead to potential funding uh, for AI integrations in Jupyter, they are being impacted by this. So like, yeah, you can check the Zulip channel, but Adam has a user who has run into this on their Jupyter Hub deployment. And there's another person at NASA who is trying to host a like hackathon that I will be joining in a couple of weeks. And they tried Jupyter AI v3 and they were like, I'll solve this almost immediately. Um, yeah, and on our side, obviously can't go into very much detail, but we are seeing this issue as well. I still don't know why exactly um, this happened all at once. I think that's like definitely like part of the post-mortem, so to speak, is like go back and figure out like what actually went wrong because it seems like it was working fine for quite a while, and then all of a sudden things got much worse. But the the main takeaway here is that like we have tried to fix this bug before in Jupyter Server documents. Now, of course, the elephant in the room is that Jupyter Server documents is not Jupyter Collaboration. It is essentially Jupyter Collaboration where we have shipped a deliberately minimal backend that re-engineers things and does things differently. So it is absolutely possible that this bug is like each and every one of these bugs is like tied to Jupyter Server documents. However, I do think that just in general, I don't think that either RTC implementation can claim that they have perfect confidence in its stability for remote deployments. I think both RTC implementations, like our maintainers have like basically tested it locally and it works very well in most cases. But there are some really, really complicated edge cases when you involve like the entire RTC stack with like remote deployments and network conditions, like network instability, race conditions, all sorts of things. Um, and with all of that said, I have come to the conclusion that like uh, it is it might be time to decouple RTC from Jupyter AI. And make it at least a optional path for users. So this is also motivated by some users explicitly asking for this. So there is a discourse post I literally just saw yesterday about this as well. And yeah, like what this proposal is going into is like it goes way more into detail on like the more context and motivation surrounding this. But basically, like I believe it is possible to make Jupyter AI work in a way that doesn't require RTC. And that is what the proposal covers. It covers the technical details of what needs to happen. It would be a very major refactor. It would take, I would say, at least a couple of weeks, but I really want to get this out very soon. My wedding is happening around like mid-September, so I really want to get this done before then because otherwise it could be another like month after that. So my personal goal is to get this out by September 1st. I understand that like it's not super polite to like try and rush a proposal because it feels like it is being forced on users. But I do want to highlight like the urgency around this. Like this is like actively causing people to just completely lose files. And if they don't have like file system backups configured, like they can lose entire hours, if not days of work. Like this is a pretty severe issue. So there is some urgency that I think motivates this. This will probably be Jupyter AI v3.2, which means the new Persona API, that proposal, which has been sitting in there for a while. I understand it's been there since like or May, but that will probably be pushed out to another future release to avoid renaming it any further. Like the new proposals are just named like the actual proposals, and we're not going to tie them to a specific minor release unless we have like very good confidence that they are actually going to make it for that release. Specifically, what I want to raise at this call was like, I would love some review from folks on the technical details, like especially for maintainers, just to do a quick sanity check and make sure like this even sounds plausible. I have met with as many maintainers as I could yesterday. But yeah, um, but I'll stop rambling in a bit, but I do want to go over the high level idea here. Basically, RTC is required in two key areas. One is when AI agents make edits to a file system, they appear immediately in the UI. Without RTC and vanilla Jupyter Lab, you have to refresh the page. And as far as I know, there's no workaround, or there's no existing extension that can provide that. Like the only option to see live file edits is to use RTC. And
There is an existing extension.
there is.
I should have mentioned that yesterday, but
Sorry.
Sorry, only when you said that there isn't, it kind of flashed. Yes, there is. I will send a link in a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please do. This is exactly why I want to get review from folks. I didn't want to like go out there and just say like, hey, there's nothing like this that exists. We're going to build our own, because we saw how that went. The other thing is like Jupyter Chat needs a pretty major overhaul because Jupyter Chat is tied to RTC right now. Now, there is thankfully some existing work. So originally in the early days of Jupyter Chat, there was a WebSocket implementation that just uses simple WebSocket protocol. Like it's not RTC, it's not YJS, it just uses simple WebSockets. We can bring that back. But we would also need to add a new package that is shared between the two and defines the API contract. So we would have two different chat providers, one that works with RTC, one that does not. And we would need to bridge the two. Now that I think about it, there is another way. I mean, we don't have to create a separate package. We could just try and no, we have to, because the RTC chat requires Jupyter collaboration as a dependency. Anyways, yeah, that is the high level gist. Is like I believe there's a way to either reuse an existing extension or create a new one to provide that live content. and we need to refactor Jupyter Chat, refactor Jupyter AI, but I believe it's possible. And this will make RTC optional. It will also make Jupyter Server documents optional. So Jupyter AI by default, when you install it, it's not going to have RTC anymore. But you can install it with an optional dependency group, and that will install Jupyter Collaboration and the original chat experience. And you can also install it with Jupyter Server documents. So for the end users, we hope that almost nothing will change. There may be very minor usability regressions, and like when AI agents edit files, it might be a little bit jittery, more jittery than usual. It won't be as seamless. But the trade-off is that like we can essentially guarantee that are not going to be any kind of crazy catastrophic bugs where you lose data. Yeah. Thank you. All right, I see some hands up. I think Zach raised his hand first. I don't know. I think it's ordered left to right.
Do you think they sent a monotomically increasing integer to tell who would go first?
Yeah.
I don't have anything technical I want to add yet, but other than, well, yeah, I want to start by saying this is there's a ton of like invisible work that David's been doing and putting in long days and hours, and then like really trying to reach out to people individually that I think sometimes just doesn't get acknowledged or yeah, like shown gratefulness for. So like I just want to start by saying, David, I know this is like kept you up at night a lot, literally kept you up at night. So in a time where you're going into a busy life season. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for yeah, reaching out to folks and trying to do your best. Open source is messy. So I appreciate you doing that. So I'll do that and let Mike speak up. Just thank you for your work and effort and time and literal blood, sweat, and tears.
No blood yet. Not yet. Mike?
Okay, I found the link to the extension that already does hot patching. I think this is how it refers to this. Does your proposal address the issue of like granularly updating the notebook as we talked about
Yeah.
without side effects? Or...
Yeah, it talks about that. I am saying that I want to, so like the way I phrased it in the proposal is like this like granular updates where like we're not just reloading the entire page. I want to deliberately like make that like a stretch goal, but not in
Okay,
the initial scope.
yeah,
Because again,
that's fine.
like the most important thing right now is like this is absolutely stable because
Okay,
when we start
yeah.
doing granular updates, it's
No,
fudging
yeah,
stuff.
it will be a little bit annoying to the users, but much less annoying than losing data. Now, I want to say, I believe that pull request 610 or 11, sorry, I forgot, in Jupyter collaboration will solve most or all problems on the other RTC stack, and I will be ready to be perfectly confident about the edge cases there. But it also requires this granular updates on the user interface. So basically, when a patch arrives, when the notebook changes, we don't want to reload widgets and user to notice that there is a side effect. And that requires some
Mhm.
developments. Basically, we'll have a shared goal to contribute to Jupyter Widoc in the future, but it's not the first priority. I wanted to talk about the implementation that already exists. I think that the proposal that you arrived at using watch files is a much better one than what is already implemented in the open source that was pipe coded with Claude. I've sent link to the hot notebook patching extension that exists, but I also wanted to call out that it has a very nice UI, so maybe some inspiration for the future. And I linked to a comment on LinkedIn where I went into some more details on why this like implementation that they did could be improved. I think your proposal is fine.
Mhm.
I wonder, is there a way for you to potentially contribute these things directly into core repositories, like assuming that you get instant review from maintainers. As much as I can promise that only for this week, I will not be available next week. So that we start upstreaming these things and like
Yeah. Like we don't
I
want to
think
get in
this is on
another
the roadmap.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we don't want to get in a situation where just
So
get stuck in Jupyter AI forever.
yeah, but
Right.
I'm saying I don't know if what part of that is very easily upstreamable or contributable upstream first. But if there is one, for example, the server extension, maybe it could go directly to Jupyter Server. Maybe not. Like if there is not too much of an extra effort going to opening the PR there, I don't want to lead you into a path which will add more effort. Or yes, if the front end changes, that could be an extension which ships with Jupyter Lab. I'm just saying I I will spend time reviewing that as a priority if that unblocks you.
Yeah. My take is like I do think it makes sense. I do think it makes sense to do it in Jupyter AI Contrib until it's stable. Because like right
Yeah.
now, yeah, the initial release is just going to be published when it's like literally working in a minimal state and the usability might not be great. I do think like for it to be truly official, I think that other maintainers would definitely want a little more out of it, right? They would want to review the diffing, like if we do support diffing logic, that is risky. People are going to want to review that. People are going to want to test that. And like I think the bar for it making it into like an official org would be much higher. And like, like
Well,
we could shove under.
the bar for a final release, yes. What we could potentially do is like if that's a plugin or a new package in the monorepo of Jupyter Lab, it will not
Mhm.
be released until 3 months from now as a final, but we can publish 4.7 alpha free today, right? So it's just saying like if there are ways where it makes sense to start
Mhm.
getting more eyes on that by having contributing to an official org and
Yeah.
going through this and then your extension that you still need to publish to PyPI today would just pull that plugin. Yeah,
Mhm.
we can chat about that. Like I really don't want to add any extra work for you. I want to find a way where potentially you will get more eyes and prompt reviews. So I'm just deferring that and let's talk about that more async, but Eclipse is happening soon. So
Yeah. Are you trying to catch the eclipse, Mike? Like, I don't want to keep you here. I do have time until like 20, 30 minutes after this. So yeah, just want to throw that out there. Um, yeah, thanks for those points. I think yeah, I'm definitely open to contributing it to an official Jupyter Lab org. I just want to know like what the conventions are around that because I am probably just going to be opening PRs and merging them and just to reach a proof of concept as fast as I can. And like I know that there is going to be I just don't want to upset anyone over this, like um I want to make sure that's really clearly communicated. Like this is being added, like motivated by a pretty urgent bug we're seeing in Jupyter AI. And like in the early stages, there are going to be cases where I just merge stuff, but that doesn't mean that I am going to be a dictator on that specific package forever. Like it's just a short-term thing. Yeah. Um, that's like the only call out I want to make. Otherwise, like, yeah, totally happy to let's chat async about whether you could help set that up or whatever. Thanks, Mike. Zach?
Um, yeah, I think maybe the only thing I was reading through the proposal, and it looks like, uh, so for some of us, RTC and Jupyter AI are working great. So I also want to like, as a counterpoint, this isn't killing everybody. In fact, like the experience with Jupyter AI and RTC is really great when it works. And we've done quite a bit of benchmarking just to ensure its stability. So, I do think that there's something I also want to suggest that I think some of this is if you have Jupytex, there's some other plugins that I've noticed when people have shared catastrophic bugs on remote file systems where they have these other plugins that also touch files in parallel. I would, I wonder if we could build correlation there. But the one thing I wanted to say was, or advocate for, is please don't break the CRDT implementation. Like that might be a challenge here, but the APIs, if we can still, if folks who do depend on CRDT with Jupyter AI, can continue to use Jupyter AI and not pin a version, because I don't want us to lose traction there as well, as much as we, are trying to solve this bug for folks that are submitting it in remote file systems. It is a better experience when it works than if what we're talking about doing. So, I want us to. I would just, for the sake of my world and life, I would like to not break going forward and have to also chase this new API. So if it can be an additional change rather, and I'm fine with switching defaults and using config to go back. Like I think that's fine and makes sense. But if we can kind of keep some things, working with CRDT, that would make my life easier. We can obviously talk about that going forward, but that's just me offering a counterpoint to all this.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I do want to be clear, like RTC is still going to be a supported path. And I think like the fact that we have like these API contracts where it's like basically we have two implementations, but they must follow the same contract, that basically guards against like the two implementations drifting out of sync. Like there's no way to just add an API for one. You have to add it to the shared spec, and then both of the implementations need to be updated. Now, to prevent things from being broken, I think what needs to happen is like we need a better story around end-to-end testing. So I think with the current end-to-end testing framework, I've had a lot of trouble. I had to do a lot of custom setup in Jupyter Server documents to get everything tested correctly. So like, for example, like running it on different versions of Python, running it on different versions of Jupyter Lab, doing tests in triplicate to make sure that they're not flaky. So that is one thing that Jupyter Server Documents does today, is like to guard against issues that we have already fixed. We actually run all of our end-to-end tests in triplicate. So it's like some people, they will just run the test 3 times until one passes. We're actually doing the opposite, where we run it 3 times, and if a single instance fails, we count the entire test as failed. We should have like that level of guarantee in all of these packages, and ideally like test on all of these different environments, right? We got no RTC with Jupyter Collaboration and then with Jupyter Server Documents, right? We want to test all 3 of these cases. And ideally, we should be able to use the same test suite in all of them, because if we have that live content provider, then as long as your UI is not in a dirty state, you don't have any unsafe changes, then the content should still update in real time. So that is the ultimate goal, is like to have the experience basically be identical for all 3. It's just that like things are going to be a bit different. Adam, read on both points. I was not able to replicate. Yeah. And that's the classic problem with these like RTC bugs, is like so many of them, virtually all of them, I'm not able to replicate locally. If I have access to like the actual server, like sometimes I'm able to, but even then it's not a guarantee. And I think like we can keep trying to fix all of these different bugs, like play whack-a-mole with all these bugs. But ultimately, like there are going to be some users who need that absolute guarantee. And if we don't have that, if we don't have a fallback path to say like, hey, you tried RTC, but again, due to some mysterious condition for you, it doesn't work out. Right now, they have no fallback other than to uninstall Jupyter AI and just never use it again. But yeah, this proposal will address that. And other people who try RTC, like Zach, they're rolling with it in production. and it is working beautifully. So again, like I'm not saying all remote deployments are suffering this issue, but it's like most of them, like most of the bugs are found in remote deployments. Yeah. And I don't even know if it's a Jupyter Hub issue, Zach.
I know, but they have tons of experience on deploying these systems in remote
That's true.
cluster. Like I'm not saying it's Jupyter Hub problem. I'm saying those are literally the experts in the room on this kind of problem. So it'd be great to get some of their vantage points on this.
Yeah, I think another coworker of mine is meeting with them soon. But yeah, I'd love to hear about that too. Jason,
I'm really curious when there's content lost, is there what avenues does the user have to recover content? Is it really completely lost out of the RTC system? Like we have no ability to revert?
yeah. And this is where we
You got to
made
read
a
these.
pretty
You got to read these
Only-
YJS blog posts. Have you read these blog posts? There's some pretty intense fire being thrown at ideas that just implement like the whole protocol for YJS. But they make these decisions to redo the entire doc at times. And if you get caught in a scenario where it decides to throw out the whole doc,
Okay. There's no recourse. So the only recourse is external backup of some kind, external snapshotting. Okay.
Yeah, but like Adam said, like most people are only going to be snapshotting or backing up like every day, right?
Well,
so you're still losing hours.
Right. If you
Hours of
have
work.
automatic file system snapshots like every 20 minutes or whatever, I mean, that's a recourse, right? Some sort of external
Yeah,
snapshotting.
yeah, but like a lot of people don't. And
Yeah.
also one thing that Zach, I hope it's okay to say this just in public, but like one thing we really screwed up with Jupyter Server documents is we did not fully consider the consequences of disabling that save button. I looked into this a bit more, and when you save a button, it like we disabled it because we're like, oh, we have autosave, right? And I think Brian was the one who brought up this idea. It's like, well, if we have autosave, why do we need a save button? It's like, okay, sure, why not? Let's just remove it. So I think I was the one who opened that PR and I didn't think too much of it. But saving the save command in Jupyter Lab, it creates like a notebook checkpoint, like an IPyMB checkpoint. And that could have been used as a backup, but we disabled the command so they didn't even have a checkpoint to fall back to. And I didn't even know that that happened until like I looked into this bug a bit more and people were like, hey, I can't even restore the checkpoint. I'm like, wait, what? There are notebook checkpoints? Like I've been working,
It's in the file
it's
menu.
so embarrassing because I've been working on Jupyter Lab for years and there's a lot of these like features where it's like people added them, but like
yeah, I didn't think of that either, and I know about the checkpoints.
yeah,
I wrote the checkpoint system, so I didn't realize that the
yeah.
client does that as a signal for both. That it saves the save button does both save and checkpoint.
Yeah, which makes sense. It's just like, yeah, we screwed that up. So, I mean, but even if we had that checkpointing system, it wouldn't be ideal because like what happens if you restore that checkpoint and then that data gets lost? Because I think you only get one checkpoint. It only saves the most recent one, I believe. I'm not
It
sure.
does. You can the default in Jupyter Lab is yes, it's that. But the checkpoint system allows you to do multiple checkpoints.
Yeah.
They just by default they just use the last one, but you can configure that and yeah.
So maybe that's like an additional thing that we should have like a guide on like deploying Jupyter Lab more safely. Like we should test it with Jupyter Collaboration. Like I'm curious if like the checkpoints get created when you save. Um, yeah. Um, and maybe like the guidance is like, okay, if you use RTC, you should definitely set this like config option that says save like 5 checkpoints per file or something.
We could
like
checkpoint server side. Why don't we just checkpoint server side?
Can we? But
yeah,
but no, I don't want to checkpoint server side because that's what's causing the data loss.
Why?
Well, probably. I mean, it could be happening client side, but it's most likely, you know what I mean?
I don't know
Like if
why
you're doing the checkpoint is a manual action. Like the checkpoint, when a user hits Command S, they're not going to hit Command S if they saw the entire notebook gets deleted, right? It's a manual action. But if it's being done automatically on the server, then it's like, oh, well, the notebook, it doesn't even check for that. And it's just going to create a checkpoint for there. And then if it's doing that every 5 seconds, then all of your previous checkpoints go away, right? So like I do think it makes sense for the checkpoint. I think the current behavior makes a lot of sense. The user is only going to manually save if they know this is a good state. And maybe like in JSD or Jupyter collaboration in general, instead of saying this command is disabled, maybe it just doesn't save, but creates a checkpoint, right? And maybe
yeah. I
yeah.
think you can do a score of like a risky checkpoint and checkpoint along the way where like you keep 5 snapshots around, and there's a risk factor calculated to understand like, okay, this checkpoint if I'm going to checkpoint this, I've just emptied the notebook. But yeah, but you're right. I could see
But
we could play that.
here's a tricky thing. There are different ways for data loss to happen. And this is also one of the reasons why I am proposing sort of the nuclear option here where we disable RTC by default is because it's not just like one bug, right? Like the recent wave of reports I'm hearing, it's like multiple things. One is like the notebooks get truncated to 0 bytes, like everything in the file is gone. Not even the JSON like structure around it. It's completely gone 0 bytes. And there's like this dot invalid file that's created next to it. The other one, which I'm a lot more worried about, honestly, because this is like, so like for the first bug, I have found like a condition where that happens, where it's like if you forcibly kill the server, that can happen because Jupyter Server documents, we save the file when the server's shutting down. So if you interrupt that by forcibly killing the process, it can cause data loss, right? So that one, at least I have like a hypothesis for. The second one that people are reporting is like you run a very long running notebook for like, let's say 3 or 4 hours. And then somehow halfway through, maybe like an hour or two halfway through, the entire notebook gets reset to an empty state. And the JSON structure is still there, but it's just there's only a single code cell and it's completely empty. It's like you just created a new notebook. And then in that case, it has 618 bytes instead of 0 bytes. Like this is like the type of stuff that I've been investigating and like just having a simple heuristic on saying like, oh, is the file 0 bytes or not? I'm not confident that that would catch all of the cases. Yeah.
I did have a thing too in the agenda for this. So I'll do a quick little. We have like 1 minute,
sure.
but it kind of doesn't matter until. I was kind of hoping Mike would still be here, but it's okay. I could bring it up next week too. But there's some like. I think there's still some like negative energy between Jupyter Server documents and Jupyter Server YDoc. And I just wanted to be clear about what the differences are because we're going to have to eventually make a choice to move to do something in core server. So again, forgetting our current mindset of taking RTC out of the flow. There's a future world we do want CRDTs, I think, running in our system. We do want notebook state in the server. And under that, the two differences, like the choices that were made that are I think really something we have to agree on, which path to take. The forks in the road are in Jupyter Server YDoc. There's a big choice to use NEIO as the thing. So a structured concurrency model for how you manage tasks that get structured or get scheduled. We don't use that in Jupyter Server documents. So that was actually probably the main reason we wrote Jupyter Server documents was to take NEIO out of our system because NEIO has created some issues for us. And I don't think any of us fully understand the reasonings why NEIO is so problematic, but it has plagued IPyKernel and it's plagued Jupyter Server. So, and in going down the direction of using NEIO, Jupyter Server YDoc, which sits in Jupyter Collaboration today, abstracted out this concept. They tried to make like a generic WebSocket server for CRDT documents. So there's like an extra pass-through layer of complexity where they start a web server to serve WebSockets to the server. So there's a ton of complexity in that, right? Because now you manage a sub server under the server. We don't do that in Jupyter Server Documents, so that so we flattened that a lot and made it simpler. I don't mean that as a critique. I mean that as technically it's simpler. So that's all rolled up in the NEIO choice. And then the second thing we did in Jupyter Server Documents that's not in Jupyter Collaboration today is we moved the notebook state to the server, right? The critical piece here, which is you put the CRDT, the how do you communicate with kernels? You do that in the server, not through kernel WebSockets, and then resolving that on the client side first. And that solves the offline output problem. That is not in Jupyter Collaboration today. The way you get that in Jupyter Collaboration is you have to depend on the library that Eric Charles's team wrote called Jupyter Server MB model. So that's a separate plugin you install from his org. So I just wanted to clarify that stuff because I think there's there's some conversation happening in Zulip about Jupyter Server Documents made these strong opinionated choices. And that's not, I think it got conflated with early on, we had this output processor that was an opinionated choice, but we have since disabled that and disabled it by default. It's in the package, yes, but you have to enable it to turn it on. And I think, it probably needs a whole new rewrite. So I just wanted to write those down because I think there's some the assumption is that library is really opinionated in a lot of ways. And I actually think it's less opinionated. And so as we're starting to figure out what code we're going to land in core Jupyter Server, we got to basically decide on the NEIO choice. My personal opinion is that NEIO should not be part of the stack at that part of the layer. It just adds a ton of complexity and bad failure modes. We also did some benchmarking inside of Apple and found that WebSocket server is the source of a lot of data loss as well. And so in Jupyter Collaboration, as the number of clients goes up to 3 to 4, so if you have 4 people collaborating or more, you start to lose data. And it's because you now have you have network calls now, even though they're internal network, and then you have all kinds of scenarios where it's having to track client connections in 2 places and then sync those, and then sometimes those get dropped. And so then it's managing that state is really, really tricky. You've added complexity on managing state around client connections. That's my hunch on why it's causing some data loss. But so I just wanted to say all that. I'll bring it up next week, but get it on record. Cool.
It is on record.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
There's a link in the notes to the solar eclipse. We will stop the recording and let people go.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.